Welcome to another Model A mini guide. We're doing it a little differently this time. Usually I do deep technical dives into limited subjects, but this time I have been asked to try to get a couple of cars running. These cars were owned by a friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago, and it occurred to me that this would be a good topic for a video. So we're going to do one. I have been helping to liquidate my friend's collection. So I've been out to this location before, but I had not really touched either of these cars. So I got out here and relatively quickly we established that the car on the left, this 30 Roadster, the engine is completely seized. The water pump is seized. The engine is seized. I gave it penetrating oil for a couple of days. Yeah. What we have here is failure to lubricate. So this will not be this will not be a will it start video involving that car. That car will not start. But this car on the right, this 29 two-door, I have higher hopes for. It's only been off the road for probably 4 or 5 years. So I thought this would be a really good topic for a video, because this is something that you might get called upon to do in your club or for a friend or for the widow of a friend. This is a situation where a car has been off the road for not terribly long. And you're not sure exactly what it needs to get it going, but it's not your car, and your time is not unlimited, and you don't want to be called back sort of over and over to try to get the thing running. You kind of want to come in and do the job and be done. The theme of day one is no surprises, by which I mean get all the surprises out of the way on the first day. So let's take a look. I don't know if you can see, but there's no key. The key is missing or unknown. So we're going to have to swap it out with an ignition switch that has a key. The fuel gauge reads 0, but of course that can't be trusted. It does have floorboards. Battery, I'm sure, is dead. So, what else we got here? Battery cutoff switch. Have to make sure that's set to on. We've got 6-volt positive ground alternator, so that's good. Don't have to worry about that. 12 volt or anything weird going on there. One thing that is hard to see, maybe we can see it from the other side. So the crank pulley is set too high, which means I can't get at the crank through the standard, through the little hole that goes through the radiator. And I think the reason is, I don't know if you can see, he's got these beehive style springs, these aftermarket springs that were popular back in the day. And unfortunately they sit too high. So as a result, crank pulley's too high. And what that means is, means I can't crank it around from the outside, which means I'm going to have to use the crank wrench to crank it around and check all the valves, which is just a pain. So what else we got? I did check the engine is free. The water pump moves, so that's good. But let's see. Oh no! Steel fan, the death fan. Oh well. Replacing the death fan is outside the scope of a get it running visit, but that's definitely something that they're going to want to disclose when they sell it. Everything else looks pretty standard carb. Nothing too unusual going on. One thing you'll see here is there's a vacuum line going to the manifold, and so we will want to try to plug that for getting started purposes. And the reason is that the vacuum line, that runs the wiper, and there can be, if something's been sitting like this, there can just be a huge number of vacuum leaks between the wiper and the manifold, and you just don't want to be troubleshooting a vacuum leak at the same time as you're trying to get it started. We can always plug it back in later, so that's something we'll take off. So the next step is draining the fluids. I checked the oil. Normally I would drain the oil, but the oil, it looks like he must have changed the oil just before he passed away. The oil looks pristine, so I'm not going to drain the oil. In other good news, looks like the tires all hold air, so that's good. So this is vented. That's good. Still smells like gas. That's good. Spark arrestor. That's, yep. That's the float for the fuel gauge. Looks okay. I mean, first glance. Got to get in there with a bore scope. See for sure. So caught another couple of lucky breaks here. There was no gas in the tank, and I was able to remove the spark arrestor and look around with a bore scope inside the tank, and the tank looks good, very clean. And so it doesn't look like there was anything basically from the tank all the way to here, but the sediment bowl has had some gas sitting in it. And I think we can also assume that the carb has had gas sitting in it. So I'm going to remove both of these and take them to clean them overnight. The sediment bowl attaches through the firewall. And so to get it out, you have to undo this line here, which then pivots away. And then there's this nut, which you loosen. And then this piece is actually part of the sediment bowl, and it's going to slide out through the firewall. And so to get it out, you have to hold it still while you rotate the nut. So that's going to require either an assistant or, as in my case, having very long arms. All right, so now that we have either cleared or removed for cleaning the entire fuel system, we're going to move on to the ignition system. So we've already established that there's no key, which is unfortunate. So it means I'm going to have to swap out this ignition switch, which I'll do when I bring a new one. But the other thing is I'm going to remove the coil for testing. I'm going to remove the distributor for testing. I'm going to remove this as well. In fact, I'll probably remove that first because I need to remove the shield in order to get at the distributor set screw. I don't have to worry about loosening these head nuts because I've already drained the coolant. The spark plugs I'm also going to remove for a couple of reasons. One is they just look terrible. There's all that rust around the base. Even if they work, it's an awful look, not really in keeping with the rest of the car. Well, once I get the car cleaned up. So we'll replace these spark plugs, but then more importantly, I've got to have the spark plugs out so that I can crank the engine over by hand easily and verify that all the valves are moving up and down. When a car has been sitting for a few years, one of the things that can happen is one of the valves can get stuck in place. So I need to make sure none of the valves are stuck. If one of the valves is stuck, I'm going to need to put some penetrating oil on it, see if I can get it unstuck. So that's the next step, is basically take all this stuff out. So I've removed the entire ignition system, and I've also removed the plugs. I looked at the plugs. They looked okay. They all looked even, which is important. And with the plugs out, and importantly, the car out of gear, you should be able to turn the engine over using just the fan. So if you can reach in with the fan blade, you can see the crank pulley is turning just through me pushing and pulling on the fan blade. So this is a very convenient way to crank the engine if you're able to get all the plugs out. And of course, I also have the distributor out, so it's not having to turn the distributor. So this is sort of as easy as things are going to get for this engine. And I'm just using my bore scope to check in here in each of the cylinders. And what I'm looking for is I'm just looking at each intake and exhaust valve, turning the fan and watching to see, does that valve go up and down? And once I see each valve go up and down, move on to the next valve, the next cylinder, etc. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show you the bore scope because the camera that I use for the bore scope is the camera on which I'm recording this video. So you'll just have to believe me. So now that we have checked the ignition system and we've checked to make sure that all of the moving parts that are supposed to move do move correctly. And you can also, I mean, if the valves are working, this should be fine, but you can also put the bore scope down the distributor bore and you can look at the oil pump drive gear assembly and make sure that that is turning. So that way you make sure that the distributor should be moving when you put it back on. So now that we've checked all of those things, or removed them for cleaning and testing, now we're going to go over to the other side of the car and we're going to do some continuity testing with the electrical system. I just got the floorboards out. And one thing that I'm noticing here, and you may notice in the car that you're working on, is we've got some non-standard battery connections. So you've got these battery cables, and it's clear that some of these go up to, I've got your battery disconnect here, which we'll test in a minute, but you've also got these, some of these wires coming off, and you got this lead that's kind of going off to nowhere, in fact. But if you get into this and you see like leads going off to mysterious places, for purposes of getting a car running, you should feel free to just disable them, much as I disabled the vacuum wiper. You are really trying to isolate down to the core systems, and the fewer things you have that are potentially causing problems, the better. Now in this case, that lead doesn't go anywhere, and these just go to a little charging port for a battery tender. So these are no harm, no foul, but you should definitely feel free to disconnect anything that you can't tell where it's going, or if it runs off and is like a turn signal or a horn relay or something that somebody's put a Band-Aid on. You should feel free to disconnect those. You're really just trying to get the engine running at this point, get the car in saleable condition as much as possible. If you get the engine running, you can always come back and reconnect them and try to improve things if you have extra time. But for right now, I recommend that you don't borrow trouble, as it were. All right, I have removed the dead battery and taken it over to a battery charger, see if we can revive it. I have high hopes. It did seem to be taking a charge. But I'm not going to put another battery in. Instead, I've got these wires hooked up. You may be thinking, what's he doing with these wires? And what we're doing is we're simulating a battery. So I've got these wires hooked up to digital power supply. So this power supply is putting out about 6.3 volts, which is, about what a healthy battery would be putting out. And right now, there's no amp draw because the battery disconnect is set to off. And what this will allow us to do is as we turn things on or off, we will not only see whether they turn on or off, but we'll see what the amp draw is. And I will be able to check continuity across and jumper across various wires. And I'll be able to see in real time how the amp draw changes as I jumper across those wires. And that's going to tell me if there are any wires that are bad without having to invasively connect and disconnect those wires. So let's start with switching this thing on. Okay, right away I've got a very small, I would call that a parasitic draw. And so my very strong guess is that's his alternator. So alternators have a parasitic draw. They are drawing current all the time, even while you're just sitting there. And that's the reason a lot of guys with alternators put battery disconnects in the first place. But that means the battery disconnect's working. Let's see what else. Turn that light off. Let's see if I can get. Yeah. There's my dash light. Dash light's on. All right, my dash light draws about 3/4 of an amp. All right, well, let's see. I can just check his lights from right in here. Let's see. Parking up. Yep, there's some. Low beam. 7. High beam. Also 7. Some weird numbers. All right, well, at least we know things are generally working. All right, let's see. It occurred to me that a lot of you guys might not have a digital power supply, but you can still do something very close to what I'm doing. So I'm going to show you how. What I've done here is we're going to use the horn as a kind of a telltale. So the first thing that I want you to do for this is, first of all, make sure the horn is working. Make sure the horn's in good condition, oil it. You can just take the cover off, put some oil on it, and so then put the cover back on. And then the most important thing is you want to get the adjustment screw and back it off so that it's not clicking anymore, which means that the motor is just going to spin and spin. It's not going to sound the horn. Okay, so then when it sounds, and I've got my horn mic'd here, so hopefully you can hear both me and the horn. So when the horn sounds, it'll sound like this. Now you notice this horn, it's a little variable. This horn hasn't been used in a while. But it's kind of coming to an equilibrium here. And we're going to use that as our baseline. And the reason is that, so right here, on this one it's on an alternator, but there's a similar point on a generator. Right here there's this kind of critical point where power feeds back from either the generator or the alternator into the battery, and also power flows through to the horn and the lights. So this is kind of a critical juncture in the power system. And the problem is that there's a lot of wiring between the battery and here, because the wiring has to go all the way up through this loom and then into the junction box and then down, back through the loom, and then into the fuse. Usually people have a fuse, and then into the starter switch, and then in this case up to the battery disconnect, and then out. So so there's a lot of places for wiring to degrade. between these 2 points. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hold the horn down, and then I've got this jumper lead here, and we're going to jump from this point to various places in the wiring, and we're going to listen and see if that horn sound gets any faster. And if it does, then that means that we have removed a source of significant resistance in the wiring. And that's important because we want this car to run without significant resistance in the wiring. Notably, a thing to be aware of is that these on the junction box, I guess you can't really see a terminal box, these little knobs are live, so you can clip a lead to them, or you can touch a multimeter to them, and you'll get a reading, and we'll be using that. So I'm gonna put the camera on the stand, and we'll see how this goes. I'm just gonna use the old yardstick across the steering wheel trick to hold the horn on. And what I'm going to try to do is to work backward and see where the problem first occurs, if there's a problem. It's picking up speed a little bit, but I think that's just because it's kind of, yes, it's come back down. Oh. Try it again. Yeah, I think it's just warming up. Oh, hey, look at you, right here. And goes back down. Let's try it on the other side of the fuse. No change, no change. No change. This side of the fuse. Whoa, look at that. Imagine that. All right. Well, looks like that fuse is a real problem. Well, that was a fun journey. So because we are trying to get this car ready for sale, we're trying to reduce the number of problems to the absolute minimum. And what I'm going to do is just take this fuse out of the circuit. And so I'm just going to, instead of this wire going to the end of the fuse, going across the fuse into the starter switch, we're just going to go the way it was originally done, which is this wire goes directly to the starter switch. All right, so thanks to our friendly horn, we solved the problem with the fuse box and where we were getting a lot of resistance in the electrical circuit. And the last thing to do before we head out on our first day, remember this is a no surprises day, or make all the surprises come to me at once, is we need to see if the starter is working in its current state. So I've popped a fresh battery in here. It's a fresh fully charged battery. I just got it hooked up. And we're just going to hit the starter button and see kind of how things sound. Now, in order to approximate a real-life situation, I'm actually going to go ahead and just put the spark plugs back in just a little ways so that it's got some compression. All right, I got my spark plugs in there, literally just plugging the hole. And gonna hit the starter, see what happens. Oh, nice to, I wasn't in gear. Let's try that again. Ooh, that's terrible. That's awful. We're back working on the starter, and so I've tried to take everything possible out of the equation. I've run a ground cable, as you can see here, coming off the starter bolt. So that's going back to the bolt on the chassis where the ground strap connects to the battery. The ground strap connection, both at the frame and at the battery, has been wire brushed. The battery terminals have been wire brushed. The negative terminal has been, I wire brushed everything. And what I've also done is I've taken the starter switch off. It's a reproduction starter switch. It looks okay. It's definitely not making as good contact as it could, but I don't think it's the problem. But I've taken it off just so that we isolate everything. And then I've also taken the battery disconnect out of the equation. And what we're going to do, this cable runs directly to the negative terminal on the battery. And then you can see this cable runs, hopefully you can see it, runs directly to the ground. And what we're going to do, watch the sparks fly. We're just going to touch this directly to the button on the starter. And that is going to really show us the maximum possible performance of this starter on this engine. The battery is freshly, fully charged. I just took it off the tender. I've got fresh spark plugs in the plugs, so this is an accurate representation of the compression that this thing's going to confront. So let's make some exciting noises. I've got I have the starter mic'd up here, so hopefully you guys can hear it. All right. That is much better. That's not the greatest starter I've ever heard, but that is fine. That is just fine. So good. So what this means is that the problem is not the starter itself. The problem is somewhere in the wiring. Most likely the problem was the ground. I probably solved it just by popping that ground on there. But just to be sure, I'm going to repeat this test. I'll put the starter back on and I'll try it. I mean, I'll put the switch back on and I'll try it. And then I'll put the battery disconnect back on and I'll try it. And I'll see whether any of those causes a marked decrease in the starter's performance. If they don't, we'll leave it. If they do, I guess if it's the starter switch, I guess I might have one. I might have a starter switch lying around somewhere. If it's the battery disconnect, I can take that out of the equation pretty easily. All right, well, spoiler alert, it was in fact the battery reconnect switch that was causing the problem. As soon as I put that back in the circuit, the starter went back to that real slow crank that we started with. So I've taken it completely out, and I'm just running the battery cable that did go to the switch. I'm running that straight into the starter switch. And as I'm sure you can tell, I do need to go and get some electrical tape and wrap that lug because we're one dropped wrench away from a bad time right now, but I'll get that. I've broken down the carburetor and the sediment bowl and gotten them ready to go into an ultrasonic cleaner. The sediment bowl, you can see, got the main assembly here, bowl, and then here's the gasket and the screen. It's right there. And then for the carburetor, I've got the bottom casting, top casting, venturi. The float obviously is going to want to float, so I've secured it with a paper clip. And then we've got some of the small parts here. There's the gav and the pencil filter, choke lever, float valve. This is the idle mix thing. We've got the idle throttle adjustment. And then that's the, I don't know what the name of it is. It's the other thing that goes on the bottom. And then over here I've got, I don't have a spare paper gasket, so I managed to get the paper gasket out of this one. It looks like it's in good shape. I think I can reuse it. Got another paper gasket for the top, got some odds and ends. This one's from the sediment bowl. And then here I've got the fiber washers. There's 3 fiber washers that I got out of the carburetor, and I've got new fiber washers that match the inner diameter for each of them. The outer diameter is a little bigger, but that doesn't matter. You just got to get it snug around the thing that it's sealing. Got the pin for the float, got the big bolt that holds the whole thing together. One thing to note is I haven't taken the jets out. I did kind of, I tried with just a flathead screwdriver, but they didn't want to come out, and because, again, this is, we're just trying to revive a car, I didn't want to go any farther than somebody would who's just doing this out of the sort of the goodness of their heart, and with normal tools and a normal level of expertise. So I've left the jets in there. They didn't want to come out anyway, and I don't want to, break this thing, and then I have a whole new job to do. But again, like this carburetor and sediment bowl have been broken down using nothing but super basic tools, all the same tools that everybody's going to have around. And putting the carburetor back together from this point is pretty straightforward. You should not feel like you'd be, getting into like flow testing jets or anything to put a car back together from this point, especially if it, was working beforehand. Really what we're doing here, we're just trying to degunk this. There's, oxidation from the gas. There's lots of little passages in here. And these can all be, these may have all been gunked up during the time it was sitting here. You've particularly got, the fuel's going to come in here. It sits in this. When I took the float valve out, there was like green powder in here. Who knows what that was? So, just trying to get this clean so that, again, no surprises when we turn it back on. And you can see here too, look at all this, like, I don't know what that is, this oxidized gunk from years and years and years and years. So, going to try to get all that cleaned off and hopefully have a free-flowing fuel system. So I'm here in post-production with a correction. When I said that you could disassemble the carb down to the level that I did and reassemble it using only tools that anybody would have around the shop, that was not quite true. In some cases, the adjusting needle housing, this brass bit right here, some of the housings that you will encounter are 7/16. The hex face right here are 7/16, which is a wrench you would have. And some of them, quite a lot actually, are going to be 13/32, which is not going to be a wrench that anybody would have unless there was a really good reason for them to have it. And if you have one of these thick 13/32 housings and you are trying to get it out or put it in, the threads here in this part of the casting are pretty tight, and you are very likely to mess these hex faces up if you're coming at it with a 7/16 wrench. You're probably going to round these off, or if you're trying to get at it with like a vice grip or something like that, because there's not a lot of clearance here on either side. You can't really get around behind it. It's really narrow, so it's just, you can't really get pliers on it very well. You can't really rotate it very well. So if you are coming at this with something that is not exactly the right tool, the chance that you're going to mess up this part is actually pretty high. So what you do is you can make one. So what you can do is you go to the store and you get a 3/8 inch open-end box wrench, and then you get your Dremel or your rotary tool, and you get a carbide burr, or a set of carbide burrs, which if you don't have a set, they are pretty cheap and they are extremely useful. So I recommend you get them. And then what you do is you just go to work kind of very, carefully on the faces of your 3/8 inch box wrench, just on either side, slightly, just a little bit at a time with that carbide burr, a little bit at a time. And then, you do a couple of passes and then you try it on your housing, and then if it doesn't fit, you come back and you do a couple more and you try it on the housing, and eventually you will have created a wrench that is a perfect fit on that housing. And then you will have a 13/32 inch wrench that is perfect for use with this. And then you can label it 13/32 and put it in your toolbox, and then forevermore you'll have a wrench that is good for, exactly one thing. I'm just taking a shot to show the setup that we got in here. At the last minute, I remembered that you're not supposed to put rubber in these things, so I took the gasket from the sediment bowl out. But otherwise, got just basically what I showed you in the last shot. I don't know if you can see, but the castings are kind of canted over on their side. You don't want them strictly on the side because the bubbles need a way to escape. But if they're straight up and down, then things are kind of sticking out. Otherwise, that's how they're in there. So what we're using for this solution is Simple Green Pro HD in that's probably like a 1:4 dilution. And right now, waiting for the mixture to heat up, and then going to run a couple of cleaning cycles. Well, we're about halfway, I would say, through the cleaning process. I finished in the ultrasonic cleaner. A lot of these parts came out looking really nice. The brass in particular feels really good. I think we can say this is definitely a solution that is safe to use on brass. The screen, this screen was very clogged up with oxidized fuel and gunk before, and now it's looking really nice. So these guys are basically, I've got them divided into two groups. Everybody who's not cast iron is just going to get a heat gun and maybe a little bit of compressed air, blow out these passages, and then let them dry. Everybody who is cast iron is in this pitcher of just clean water so that they don't flash rust before I can get to them. Once I've done these, then I'll sort of take these one by one and try to dry them off as quickly as possible, blow out all the passages as quickly as possible, and then I'll paint evaporust on all of the exposed cast iron surfaces, which will give them a rust protection. And then we'll let everything dry overnight and put it back together in the morning. I've got the distributor set up in my high-grade Jiffy jig. The Jiffy jig was this is a period tool that you could use to basically you put this end in a vise, tighten it down, and then it's got these holes and these little auxiliary clamps that you can use to hold down various non-standard things or things that don't fit in a vise very well, like oil pumps and fuel pumps and distributors. So you can see I've got the distributor here. And a couple things. One thing is you'll notice it's got this long shaft. This is the long one-piece shaft. And, well, that's a choice. And then there's some other interesting things about this. To be clear, the problem with the single one-piece shaft, this was an aftermarket product. They were very popular in the 50s and 60s. And the idea was, why is there an upper and a lower shaft? The lower shaft just gets stuck in the engine. It's a pain in the neck. Here, replace with our one-piece shaft. One less thing to worry about. Well, there was a reason there were two shafts. These have a tendency to bind and fail. But again, we're just here to get this car running and off to its next owner. So certainly we would let them know that this is going to need to be looked at. But I don't think we need to replace it. And anyway, I don't have a spare lower shaft, so nothing I can do about it. Other things that are interesting about this distributor. As I was getting it out of the car, the condenser cracked, and of course it was not a real condenser. It was a fake condenser. The real condenser is here because these are the V8 points in condenser on the new Rex plate. So, I mean, that's okay. If it works, it's all right. Obviously, we're going to have to take this out because that's pretty unsightly and concerning. But there's some real problems here. One is, let's see, can I get this out? Yeah. So hopefully you can see. Can you see that? There's like a dark spot right here. That dark spot is actually a gouge in the condenser. And it comes from the cam rubbing on the condenser, and the cam is made of harder metal than the condenser is, and so eventually wears a hole in it. It damages the cam as well, but it's a problem. It's gonna damage your cam. It's gonna kind of throw your timing off, and eventually it'll damage the condenser. This is really common with the V8 plates. I've seen this lots of times. Another problem is there's a lot of slop in this plate, so I can move this back and forth. I'm not sure exactly how far this is, but it's more than I should be able to. The upper plate needs to be a tight fit around the center of the casting. That's the thing that, and it also needs to be, concentric. This needs to be a perfect circle, and that's what keeps the points, or that's what keeps your point gap consistent when you're moving this thing back and forth to change the timing. If there's slop, then as your control rod is pushing and pulling on this, then the actual distance is going to change. In fact, you can actually cause the points to open just by kind of tugging on this a little. And so that's going to make your timing go all wonky. And then, of course, there's another problem. Got my continuity test. So right now the points are closed. There's no cam in it. So if I touch to the ignition plug on the lower plate to here. So this is good, means we're good all the way through the lower plate to the pigtail to right here, to right here. Uh-oh. No good. Wait, let's see. The points are closed, but there's no continuity from the point arm to the point block. That's really bad. That means your car will not work if that happens. So I'm glad we caught that. So when I say no surprises, this is exactly what I mean. Your car will not start because your points are non-conductive. You should get that fixed. Fortunately, one thing I do have lying around is a spare New Rex upper plate with V8 points and condenser. I'm not going to use this. I really don't like this setup. There's all kinds of problems with it. But, great. So we'll swap this in. And take the fake condenser out, and then just run my continuity tests, set my point gap, and then we'll button this up and call it done. I could go, I could do things like I could polish the distributor cam. That's always popular. I will test the condenser and make sure it works, but I'm pretty sure it works. But again, we're just trying to get this thing back on the road. This distributor is going to need attention for the one-piece shaft anyway, and the new owner can polish the cam to his heart's content at that time. I'm just trying to get this thing running. So we talked about testing the condenser. I also talked about pulling the coil so that I could test it, and this is the test rig. It's actually a little bit nicer than the test rig that I would normally do because I decided to do this for a video. So this is almost like a scale model of the Model A electrical system. And what you got here is you got a 6-volt battery, 6-volt lead acid battery. You got your black wire, which represents the black wire going from the terminal box into the coil. Got your red wire, which would go from the coil back to the terminal box and then to the ignition switch. The ignition switch would then go to the lower plate. And then from the lower plate, you got your pigtail going to the upper plate. Here's your upper plate. And then the upper plate would be grounded and back to the battery. And then you would also have your high tension wire going to the chassis, which in our model is represented by this handy dandy aluminum tube, which is then grounded also back to the battery. So if you were doing this with a stock points and condenser, or just a stock condenser, the only difference here would be that your condenser would be tied in here on the lower plate, and you would need an additional lead wire to ground the condenser back to either you could ground it back to the battery, or you could just actually ground it to the upper plate, or whatever. Other than that, it would work exactly the same. So what I've got here is I've kind of rubber banded this high tension wire such that it's about a 1/4 inch away from this aluminum tube, which is a gap that the coil should have no problem jumping in ambient pressure. So this should be a working model of the electrical system, and what you are aiming for here when you're testing this is to get spark when you open the points, and not to get spark when you're not opening the points, or when you don't want to. And the benefit of doing it this way, and I'll say, if I weren't replacing the upper plate here, it would be fine to do this with these components just in the distributor, right? So I could just have the distributor sitting right here and rig up some leads to connect it. But since I'm replacing it, I just figured I'd take the thing out. But what you're trying to do is confirm the function of as many pieces as possible, so that when you go back to the car and you're putting the carburetor back in, and you're putting the distributor back in, and you're trying to fire it up for the first time, in the event that you don't get a spark, you will have confirmed the function of a lot of these pieces, and you'll be able to say, well, I know that, I know my coil is good. I know my high tension wire is good. I know my upper and lower plate and my condenser are good because I just tested them. So it'll save you a lot of time when you're at the car, or in the garage, because you're in somebody else's garage, possibly lying on the floor. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make all of our mistakes in a comfortable environment. So now that we've got all this set up, and you can see I've got my points held open with a little piece of card here. So the first thing that we're going to do is complete the circuit. So what I'm looking for here is this circuit should be open. In other words, it should not work. There should not be a spark here because my points are open. If I do get a little spark when I touch this, then that means that I've got an unintentional ground somewhere that I should fix. So, all right, so no spark, so that's good. So now I've completed this circuit, but the circuit's still open. So what I'm going to do now, I've got some electrical pliers here, and I'm just going to use these pliers to open and close the points. And when I open and close the points, I am looking for a spark right here. And if I get a spark when I open and close the points, then I know that these components are sort of in a basic working arrangement. And you know, there's a lot you could do here if you wanted to do more work. So for example, one thing you could do if you wanted is you could, I don't know if I would do it with like this teeny little battery, but you could get like a big 6-volt battery or even a 12-volt battery, and you just hook up the coil directly to it for like 5 minutes, and you let the coil get good and hot to the touch. Not super hot, not so hot that you can't touch it, but like nice and, you know, toasty warm. And then you run this again because you want to make sure that the coil will perform when it is hot. And the kind of coil that I would do that with is if you're working on a car that has the kind of coil where the bracket has been welded to the coil. Those are typically much older coils. They're not always like original coils. Sometimes they're just really vintage, but those are the ones that I've seen fail under heat stress the most frequently. So if you see that, then that is a coil that I would test under heat. This one's probably, I don't know if it's like great, but it's probably going to be fine for our purposes. So, all right, anyway. Okay. All right, so we're watching right here. Look at that. Nice strong spark. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, good. So now I know that, you know, these parts of the system, this high tension wire, this coil, this upper and lower plate, this condenser, they're good. They're good to go back in the car. Last thing before I button this up is to just note that you should, before you put this back in, you should do all the things you would do if you were putting a distributor back in your own car. This guy doesn't have the cam screw with the hole drilled in it, so I'm going to put some oil in here, and I'll put some oil in the oiler. I'll lubricate the cam, and then also here I've gone around and just with like an abrasive pad, I've gone around and made sure there's bare metal here because this is a really important grounding point. So you always want to make sure this isn't painted, so there's a really good ground between the distributor and the engine block. And then the last thing, of course, is, you know, you can just give this a good few spins, make sure it's spinning freely. Some end play is okay, but side play would not be okay here. So this one's turning really well, so I think we're good. One other thing I want to show you as I'm putting this back together. So got the rotor on, and this is the distributor body that is on the car now. This is a standard reproduction distributor body, and I don't know if you can see, maybe you can hear. So there's a lot of play between the body and the casting. And what that allows it to do is to, let's see if I can show you. See how that distance is moving around, that distance between the rotor and the terminal. Now it's not going to hit, but it's going to be very hard for you to have a situation where the distance between the rotor and the terminals is reliably the same. Because every time you kind of mess with this, right? Every time you're like popping the top off to check the timing, like time it or check something or whatever, and you put it back on, this thing's going to settle back in a little bit differently. All right, now this is a Ford service replacement. So this is not like an original, but it's OEM. So I don't know if I can convey this as sort of a tactile sense, but this thing, I'm having to wedge this thing onto the casting. I'm not gonna wedge it all the way on there, because you really have to like ka-chunk. You really have to seat it. Let's see if I can get it on there. There you go. Get on there. But it's when it's on there, it's on there. Yeah, and there's no. So yeah, that thing is not moving. The only motion here is just the motion of like the whole vise kind of rocking. But anyway, that is the kind of fit between the distributor body and the casting that you should look for. Obviously, I can't fix it for this guy. This thing's on so tight, pop the distributor right off. But that's what you should be looking for in a distributor, is that tight fit. Tight fit between the casting and the upper plate, and then a tight fit between the casting and the body to take all that slop out and all that variability out. Well, it's the next morning and everything's looking great. I've got the distributor all back together. I put Evapo-Rust, just painting on this bare metal here so we don't ever get any rust on that. Got that little plug in there. And Evapo-Rust on the cast iron parts as well. There's no flash rust visible anywhere, even in some of these little bits where the paint has worn away. So that's great. And kind of treated this, got a razor there. So now this carb's ready to go back together, as well as the sediment bowl, and go back on the car. So I'm not going to make you watch me put it back together. If you are interested in that kind of content, you can go watch Paul's channel. Made some progress here. Got the fuel system back together. It's all nice and shiny. Haven't been through the ultrasonic cleaner. So we've got the sediment bowl back in, fuel lines and the carb, and all of this is hooked up, looking nice. And I've also got that plug in where the vacuum line went. We are just about ready for showtime. I've got the new ignition switch in. I even added the ignition clamp there. It was easy because there's no coolant in this, so I could take the head nut off, and I retorqued that nut, and I retorqued the other two nuts that I had to take off to get that heat shield out, which there's no point in having the heat shield because this uses the modern condenser. So I got that put in, got the distributor on, timed, I got the plugs in, got the plugs gapped, got the coil in, got the control rods on. And when you're doing this, one of the things that's really important is to check your control rods. You want to make sure that they are correct. Specifically, what you're looking for with your spark advance rod is when the spark is all the way up, the spark advance rod needs to bring the upper plate to the far, to the far edge of the notch. If it doesn't do that, then you may have the wrong length of rod, or you may be able to, in my case, with this car, it was really close, and I was able to get just a big pair of pliers and put a little bit of a bend in this right here. Just enough. We only needed a fraction of an inch. Got it there. So that's with the spark advance. With your throttle, what you need to make sure that when your throttle control lever is all the way up, that on the carburetor that it's all the way at idle, that it's essentially that you don't have a situation where when you're all the way up, it's still forcing the carb to be off idle. You don't want that. But then when you're at maximum throttle, you want it to be able to go all the way to wide open throttle. So you want the full range of throttle in your throttle linkage. So that's a thing to check when you're putting those rods back on. Well, a couple seconds passed in this video, but in the real world, a couple of weeks have passed since I last recorded a segment. Life just gets in the way. But you'll notice that the car looks a lot cleaner. We found some time to get in and get this thing spruced up before the first start attempt continued. So where we're at is I have gotten everything back in and all connected. It was nice to get a couple of weeks in because I got gas into it, and the gas has been in there for a couple of weeks, and it's looking really good. There's no leaks or anything. The carb is buttoned up really well, so I'm really happy about that. And we're about to do one final test, which I wanted to show you. So I have set up one of these clear distributor caps, and I have set the engine to top dead center, and I've timed it. I haven't timed it super specifically. It's just in the general correct vicinity. I think it should be good enough. But we're gonna try cranking it around and make sure that we get spark at top dead center. And one of the things I also wanted to mention here is you saw how I did a continuity test on the bench for the components in the distributor. If you get back in the car and you've got everything hooked up and you're trying to repeat those continuity tests, you may get some confusing results because original pop-out switches, they are set up so that when the switch is off, the connection is still grounded. So you won't see, as we did on the bench, an open circuit from, for example, the one side of the points to the other. You won't see an open circuit there. It'll appear to have continuity even when the points are open. And that can really throw you off if you're not looking for it. If you are used to troubleshooting with reproduction, modern switches where it's a turnkey kind of switch, those do have open circuits when they're off. So a pop-out switch will not, but it does work. And that's why you really need to focus on your test being, do I get spark or not? So that's why I want to show you this test. This is a great test to just make sure that you get spark. If you don't have one of these clear caps, another way that you can do this is just to kind of rig all of this up, but don't put the body on or the cap on, and just take your high tension wire and hold it near one of these straps. Put the pop-out switch on or turn the key on, and just open the points, and you should get a strong spark from the high tension wire to the strap, just like we did on the bench. So that should work too, and that'll at least tell you that you've got spark. But this test is going to tell me that I've got spark at the right time, which is going to be good too. Now, I was disappointed that on the bench the camera wouldn't see the spark, so I'm going to try slightly different camera settings, and we'll see if we can pick up the spark this time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my crank wrench. I'm going to crank the engine backwards, which you can't do with the stock crank, the one that goes through the hole in the radiator shell. You can do it with a crank wrench. I'm going to crank it backwards, bringing the distributor rotor clockwise, and then we'll crank it forwards again. And this is the top dead center location with it being fully retarded. So when it gets to right about here, we should see a spark. So let's see if we get one. I forgot to mention one important detail, which is you need to turn the key on. Once you do that, okay. So let's see if we get a spark. There it goes. All right, we've got spark. We've got fuel. Who could ask for anything more? Diagnostic clear cap is off. Original Bakelite cap is back on. crank wrench is cleared. Key is off. Moving around to the other side. You notice I've got some cans of coolant here. Coolant is still empty. Reason for that is I don't want to fill it with coolant until I am sure that the thing actually will start. Everything I think is the same over here, except I did get that wrapped up with electrical tape so nobody gets shocked. Everything else I think is pretty normal. So what we're going to do is see if we can get it started. If it starts at all, if I can get it to run at all, I will shut it off and then fill it with coolant. And then at that point, try to get it to stabilize, set my carburetor, try to fix any problems that arise. When you get in the cab, ready for your first start, one thing that you're going to want to do before you try is confirm that your carburetor control surfaces are working. So you got your throttle here. Make sure that when you're hitting the throttle that it is depressing the accelerator. So hopefully you can see. Yep. Okay, good. That's good. And then on the choke, the gav, make sure that's good. Make sure you're able to turn it in. Comes to a stop. Able to turn it out a little bit. All right, let's give it a shot. Spark, fully retarded. Throttle to half. E-brake is on. Shifter's in neutral. Key is out. Ready on the starter, ready on the choke. Oh man, no dice. Yeah, I forgot to turn the gas on. Let's try that again. Oh, come on, you're so close. Yay! Yay! There she goes. Okay, wonderful. That was it. Right. Remember to turn the gas on. Okay, so next step is gotta fill this guy with coolant. All right, I've put 3 gallons of coolant in this car, and it doesn't appear to be leaking out onto the ground or all over the engine compartment, so that's great. So the next step is to take the car that you have just revived on a little drive, just a tiny drive around the yard, and make sure that it has normal things like gears and brakes and the wheels don't fall off and very basic things like that. And then once you do that, find a place to park it outside, because what you don't want to do kind of is what we just did, which is run it for 10 seconds and then never run it again. That's bad. You want to actually like run it in, like run it for a good 10, 15 minutes. And we're gonna drive it for a little bit, make sure that it has basic mechanical function, and then find a spot outside so that we're not breathing carbon monoxide, and try to tweak some of the carburetor settings so that it runs as smooth as we can get it. Idle's pretty rough. We can fix that. See if we can get her out of here. Okay, we have a first gear. I don't think we're going to clear that car. Okay, well. All right, let's see if we can work on this idle. After considerable amount of futzing with the carb, that's as low as I can get the idle, but it seems to be holding. So again, what you're doing is once you get the car outside, you pull the throttle lever down to a pretty high idle, and then come around here, open up the hood, and you're gonna turn in this idle screw until you're controlling the idle from here. And then you can back the throttle lever off completely. And now your idle control is all here. And then you're basically just working these one with each hand, trying to get the idle down as low as you can while messing with the idle adjustment mix until you can get as low as possible on this without the car stalling. So that's where we are right now. Other issues, we had a problem with, there was a leak coming from the water pump. So I turned in the packing nut until that stopped. So it has stopped, which is good. And then I had a leak down here, and you feel it with your finger, determine what it is. It was oil. And I was like, oh no, it could be like the oil pan gasket. But no, it turns out that the bolt on the oil return pipe just was not tight at all. So tighten that up, and that seems to have stopped. Other than that, seems to be running pretty well. So now what I'm gonna do is bring it back in and park it and put some fuel stabilizer in it and put it away. Mission accomplished.